Hello, welcome back to the Spirit Talks podcast. Yes, we've kind of been on like a couple-week hiatus, but I promise that I'm back, and this is the mental health episode. We're going to talk about the link between spirituality and mental health, my issues with it, but also maybe some discussions that we can have on what we can do about it, some silver linings, just a discussion about all of mental health in general. But before we do that, I'm going to revisit our past 2 episodes before I just kind of move on with these episodes and just start going. I feel like me going back to the first and second and this being the third, it just feels nice to like do a little round robin and go back, because I feel like there are things that I didn't discuss in the past 2 episodes that I do want to discuss just briefly that I had taken notes on. Bringing it back to because it kind of ties into some current events. So in the first episode we talked about things in the spiritual community that I see completely different now, and something that I didn't discuss in the first episode is starseeds. Now, whenever I first heard about starseeds, of course, I very much resonated with that. I always felt like an oddball. I see things differently than other people. I would commonly say to myself, I feel like I don't belong here, things like that. So whenever I see the term starseed, of course, I'm going to resonate with that. But over time, doing my own research, but as well as like doing readings for other people and actually tapping into people's past lives and how their souls express itself, the truth is a lot of us are starseeds. But I think where people don't necessarily make the distinction is that it's more about where your soul feels more at home. So like, yes, our souls are huge, and like there is going to be one of your lives that is probably on another planet or in a different dimension, like, and that's all alien, right? But it's about where your soul feels most at home, okay? Sometimes I feel like people will be like, I'm a starseed, just like people do that with like an empath. I'm an empath. Well, like, most people are empaths, most people are probably starseeds, but it's more about what you do with it. I feel like people do that. It's kind of like a spiritual ego thing, right? And really, people are only empaths because of childhood trauma most of the time, so, but I won't get into all that. Now, this reminded me because there was this thing going around TikTok a couple weeks ago that was like, the 11th gate is opening, which, what is that? I don't even know what that is. And guess what? Like, nothing's opened. I've seen nothing open. But this is like a thing in the spiritual community that every once in a while they'll be like, these solar flares, the new earth is coming. And it's like, have y'all not realized? And I guess it's just because I've been here so long that like I see these cycles of things. But it's like, have y'all not realized that like a lot of that stuff is like metaphorical and it's just energy? It's not like one day everything's gonna be different. People that were like really into the Dolores Cannon stuff, they were so stuck on thinking that the new earth was like going to be an actual physical place, and that really frustrated me, especially someone that I'm like certified in quantum healing hypnosis therapy. I think that's what it's called. I don't do those sessions because I think it breeds this kind of stuff, and I can go into a whole thing about that if y'all wanted to know like why I don't necessarily. It's not that I don't agree with it, I just think it takes a lot of discernment, and it also takes a lot of like finding the right clients to do that on. And also people that are seeking that out, you need to make sure that it's someone that you really trust putting you under hypnosis. Anyways, it was like a really big thing that, oh, there's gonna be some big event that everything changes. And it's so ironic because these cycles happen. Just like the other day, seeing the 11th gate is opening, whatever that is. Like, what gate? What are you talking about? Like, yes, some energetic gate, so like this flood of energy changes the energy of the collective. Yeah, I can get behind that. I think that's what's happening, but it's usually no physical thing. And what's so ironic about this is that the only thing that actually changed everything was COVID, okay? Y'all can put me in the direction of anyone that actually predicted COVID, like any psychics or whatever, but the psychics that I personally follow, none of them predicted COVID. So, and if they did, it wasn't as specific as like literally what happened, okay? So it's just funny that like the physical thing that actually does change everything, people did not know that that was coming, or if they did, they didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal, which is kind of crazy. And I kind of have this theory to myself, and I bet other people have this theory too. I kind of have this theory to myself that like COVID pushed us into like an alternate reality or something. It kind of freaks me out if I think about it too long. Or like a parallel reality where like COVID happened versus if it didn't happen and we're on the one where it did, and maybe that's why certain psychics weren't able to pick up on it because it was such like a switch. I don't know. That's just a personal theory of mine. But yes, it just annoys me when people do that and they try to spread fear. And of course, whenever I first started on this, I probably would have given in to a lot of that stuff, you know? But now I'm just like, anytime that someone's like, ooh, this is happening, I'm just like, okay, like, it's not that big a deal, I promise. And you know, people do that with like, you know, Mercury retrograde, solar eclipses, things like that. Act like, oh, it's gonna change everything, when really it's just an energy that you can choose to use. Like, we don't need all the fear mongering. Okay, and going back to the second episode where I talked about pop culture on a collective scale and how it's the collective shadow work, right? And these are kind of just like really short points that I want to make, and then I promise we'll get into the mental health stuff. Number one, when people look down on drag queens, okay, you know, there's been all this discourse with like drag, the effects that it has, whatever. I love drag. I want to do that at my bachelorette party. I want to go to a drag brunch. I love RuPaul's Drag Race, like, but I feel like that is the collective pushing down their own expression and their own play, because drag is all about play and expression and literally having fun, how you can express yourself through your human form. And part of the collective looking down on that is literally showing how much the collective has pushed down their own expression and their own play. And it's actually really sad if you think about it. And not to be political, but like, they're just making that, I feel like they just are literally just picking something to like blame something on, like a scapegoat. Anyways, it's really not that serious. Drag has never been that serious. Okay, my second thing when it comes to celebrity culture, and this doesn't really, I guess it kind of ties back to spirituality. It's just that I wanted to touch on how we are like craving real. Like, we are craving people to be real because, and this goes with like the state of society right now, people are struggling and they don't want to see Kylie Jenner in her $1 million house or $1 million car. Like, they just don't care anymore. Like, that's not on a pedestal for us anymore. And I just think it's interesting how people are really pushing against it now. Like, I think about when Kylie Jenner made that video of her like in her car, and she like, it was like a TikTok, and she like let the phone fall, you know, like the phone just fell. When it was obvious that it only like fell because she was trying to be relatable. But I love that now the collective is really pushing against that. We're really just like, no, we want real. Like, we are struggling and we want to see that people are on our same level. And I kind of love that. I also love that it's forcing celebrities to be more online and be their real selves. It's kind of like, if you don't have a connection with your fans in that way, then people don't feel as connected to you. Like, they need that relatability. But what's interesting is that like, some relatability can only go so far. Like, there's only so much that a normal person can like understand about that kind of fame or that amount of money, you know? Anyways, but I do think it's good that we are demanding more realness from people. Number three, just touching on the Ariana Grande and the Lizzo stuff. Just again showing how the collective shadow gets brought up by looking at these celebrities, because we've all had interactions with people of higher authority or like bosses or at work that maybe crosses a line, right? So we've all maybe had experiences of that. And us all looking at Lizzo and like speculating on it, it brings all that up within us so that it can be healed and swept away. Also with Ariana, like, I mean, we all know that girl that goes from relationship to relationship. With her, I kind of feel bad. I know that she's like, obviously, she's kind of home wrecking. I understand that, and it's been a pattern. I've never, just to be completely honest, I've never been that big of an Ariana fan. I just think of her whenever she was like on YouTube, like dressing up like a pinup girl. I don't know if anyone remembers that. But this has like been her cycle for a while, and I don't know why it took her getting with a married man for people to finally realize what that cycle is. But the reason it makes me feel bad is because I can just feel that it comes from true codependency. I mean, she's a Cancer woman. I feel like she just goes where she feels that comfort. And obviously, I don't know this woman, but I am pretty intuitive. And it makes me feel bad because I think on a collective, it's bringing that up and us needing to look at, okay, are we going to judge this woman really harshly? Or are we going to try to understand why she's like this? That doesn't mean that she doesn't need repercussions for her actions, but that's what shadow is all about, right? Like, not judging it so much, it's from a place of understanding. It comes up so that you can understand it, because a lot of us probably have that type of codependence within us as well. Okay, now into the topic of what this podcast is about. I do think I'll just start doing that. Like, if I remember things that we've talked about in the past that I want to bring up again, if there's like current events like the celebrity stuff, I'll just bring it up at the beginning of the episode. I just want to do a disclaimer that this is very vulnerable for me to talk about. I know I talked about it a little bit in the last episode and the episode before that, but there's some stuff that I'm just not really able to say because it does affect my family. But hopefully you guys can kind of read in between the lines and try to understand what I'm saying, because I do have personal experience with this. I have notes here, and they're not necessarily in the most cohesive thought process, but just try to see this as a discussion. Let's first think about the just definition of like mental illness and how it is just as important as a physical illness, but for some reason it is not treated like that. When someone has a mental illness or and as someone who was a special ed teacher, even a mental disability, right? It's usually not seen in the same way as like a broken arm. So like if someone has a broken arm, you know that you have to heal that broken arm, and you got to put a cast on, and you got to do all the things. You got to do physical therapy or whatever. But for some reason, mental health or mental illness is not treated the same way. No one looks at someone with a broken arm and judges them for getting that broken arm. But for some reason, when people have a mental illness, they judge them for it. And I'm just gonna bring up just some examples of people like this. One thing that comes to mind is homeless people, okay? I need to look up like what the percentage is, but honestly, I'm just not gonna do that right now. The percentage of people that are homeless that have a mental illness or have some type of addiction issue, okay, which I would say also is an illness, is it not? A lot of people will look at homeless people and look down on them, even though they literally just haven't gotten the help that they need. And I don't think people understand. I haven't had direct experience with people with addiction, but I have had direct experience with someone with mental illness, and I don't think people understand how hard it is to actually get someone off the street if that's where they want to be. And I'll get into that a little more later. But there was even a video that went around the other day. This man was trying to confront Drew Barrymore when she was like on the stage with somebody else. They're having like an interview, and it was scary. Like I will admit, like it was very scary. And it's obvious that he was like a stalker or something, that he'd become obsessed with her and he was trying to talk to her, and he got like escorted away. But whenever I looked at the video comments on that, you know, everyone was just like talking down at that man. When do people not understand that that is someone with a mental illness? Like, people that are obsessive stalkers, that is part of delusion. Like, they're having a delusion. It's really not their fault. And I think sometimes people want to be like, oh, well, they're just creepy. I would say a majority, it's literally their brain malfunctioning, okay? I don't know if that's the right way to say that, but it's someone that needs help, okay? And we can't keep looking at it as like, oh, this weirdo just like tried to ambush Drew Barrymore. Like, of course, I'm so glad that she's okay, because mental illness is very dangerous, and we'll get into that later. But we also have to have compassion to the person that it's happening to. There's even this girl on TikTok, I'll even try to find it and link it in the description. It was this girl who literally like came out and explained that she had a mental delusion about a celebrity as well, and she luckily got treatment for it and everything. Very vulnerable thing for her to come out and talk about, but I don't think people see it in that way. People don't understand it in that way. And I know that I don't know exactly what the details is about that man, okay? But I would bet on it that he is just sick. Just like if someone had a broken arm, he has something broken and he has to get it healed. And I talked about this in the last episode, where I feel like people have this thing, because people judge celebrities for these things, like they have this thing like, oh, well, they can help it. It's like they think that they can help it. Well, I would beg to differ, that actually that's the thing where they don't know that they need help. If someone has a bone sticking out of their arm, yeah, they know that their arm is broken. Sometimes the person that has the mental illness, most of the time, they don't even know anything's wrong. They think that their reality is real, and we will talk about that later on. And touching a little bit more on the celebrity part, and this is a celebrity that I didn't talk about in the last episode, is Kanye West. And this is really just a discussion because I want to know y'all's opinion on, like, what do y'all think about this? And I go back and forth on it myself from time to time because I'm like, I don't know what the right answer is. But the truth is, like, it's pretty obvious when Kanye is in a manic episode. If anyone has any knowledge on a manic episode, like, most of the time they don't know what they're talking about, okay? And some of the stuff that happens, they probably are not even gonna remember it. Especially if it's like psychotic symptoms, if they're in psychosis, or it's gonna be blurry. And you know, a lot of things happened whenever, you know, whenever he was saying like that, those anti-Semitic things, but there's been other things that he's done, and it's like, do we still hold him accountable? Because he might have been out of his mind. Do you know what I'm saying? And it sucks because there's not necessarily like a yes or no answer, but also like the way that everyone reacted to that, again, just shows how many people have never seen someone off their rocker. Because if you've really seen someone off their rocker, then you understand that you can't take what they're saying at face value. This even comes up with like Trisha Paytas. We talked about frenemies in the last episode. Things that Trisha Paytas did when she was having like her BPD flare up. Like, do we hold her accountable for that? Because you're literally not thinking straight. And I know those people need to get the help that they need, but again, that's where I'm like, y'all don't understand how hard it is to get someone to get help. Like, they have to want the help themselves. And I just think like there were certain times with Kanye where media outlets would like have him on to interview him and like ask him questions that would make sure to trigger him, and I'm just like, that's evil. Like, that is literally evil. And it's almost like, and they did this with Charlie Sheen too, it's almost like they were just trying to sensationalize it. And again, it comes with this thing of like, oh, they're just acting crazy. Like, no, they are crazy. And I'm laughing, but like, it's not funny. Like, it's actually very, very sad. And this is where in the spiritual community, it really bothers me when people really push the like, be delusional, like be very delusional. Well, use discernment with that, okay? Because sometimes a delusion can go way too far. And I did talk about this in one of the other episodes, but like some of the spiritual talk, especially just like the, you know, like you're a piece of God and, or you are God, you know, which of course, like, I do believe that. I do believe that we're all like facets of spirit, but hearing that as someone that would be more prone to mental illness, or they do have a mental illness, is going to push them over the edge. This thing with manifestation about, oh, just pretend that it's real, just act as if, like, sometimes people can't hear that stuff. Like, there needs to be discernment with it. And I hate when people like will make light of mental illness and they'll be like, I'm so manic right now. I'm like, no, you're not. No, you're not. You're not manic at all. Or people will be like, I'm having a mental breakdown. It's like, no, you're not. Or people will say like, I'm so psychotic. You're not psychotic. And I know maybe I'm kind of sensitive to that because obviously I've had a family member that's gone through that and I don't like making light of it. But also it bothers me when it's people that they know nothing about it and they're just saying these words. My next point is a lot of times people don't understand how drugs can affect your mental health. It's not really talked about that much. Even things like weed, where people think that weed is just like totally fine, it's a plant. There's accounts of a lot of people having weed-induced psychosis. Like, that is a thing. Also, part of my family member having their psychotic break, and yes, I've told y'all that what started the whole thing with my family member was a stroke, and then years later the doctors think that that brain damage manifested into the psychotic break. But the break happened because of stress. So like, let's say it's almost, you know how people say like the genetics are there but the environment pulls the trigger? Like, that's kind of what was going on. I will say after his stroke he was acting more aggressive and maybe a little more irrational, but he wasn't like completely, he didn't like break from reality completely until he was smoking a lot of weed. and he got a new job, which like caused a lot of stress. So it was like this perfect storm of like everything all together and then it happening. And I wish that I would have known that weed can do that to people, because I think people forget that like weed is a hallucinogen. It's not just like, oh, I'm just gonna have a glass of wine or I'm just gonna have a joint. Like there was a girl on TikTok too who she talked about how she had a full psychotic break, I think 2, and it was all from weed. And she thinks that she might have had like a genetic disposition to bipolar already, and that's what caused it. But still, I feel like we need to be careful with that stuff. We need to be having those kind of conversations. And there's even other drugs that we just need to be more careful, more intentional, more mindful about. Like people should not be like tripping mushrooms all the time. Or I know of someone that I'm pretty sure kind of had a mental break because they were taking too much Adderall. And it's just like, you know, I mean, Adderall is basically, it's like a smaller form of meth, you know. Just like when someone that's on meth, like they start like becoming very paranoid and seeing things and stuff. But again, I feel like people don't have these conversations enough and they don't talk about it enough. And this is what brings me to my next topic, which is connected to how people think in the spiritual field. Some people think like, oh, well, schizophrenia means that they can just see spirits, or they're seeing things that we can't see. And this really got me triggered when I watched this show recently called Undone, which I really loved the show, by the way. Like everything about it I loved except this one part, which this one part of the show is them basically saying people with schizophrenia have psychic powers. Like that's basically what they were saying. And I know it was an animation, so they could probably say like, oh, well, it was fiction, but I feel like it was really sending the wrong message. Because even there was this clip going around TikTok about this certain part, okay? I can't remember exactly what it was. It was like the guy was saying that the people who have schizophrenic brains, their ventricles are more open. And it had 300,000 likes on TikTok. And I know majority of that is from the spiritual community. That is scary to me. And it also tells me that those 300,000 people, there is no way that they have experienced the terrible experiences that come with mental illness. But I will say it was a great show. Like, go watch it. It's actually, it even really helps when it comes to like inner child work and stuff. It's really cool. But that is the main part where I'm like, ugh, like why? Because even in the show they were talking about like, okay, they were basically alluding to the fact that like people that have schizophrenic traits are actually shamans. And it's because shamans have learned how to control this ability. And like, trust me, I can try to wrap my head around that a little bit. Like, I'm not completely against that. And I will explain like my whole thinking on it in a second. But it's just interesting that they say that, because back to like the drug thing, it's like nowadays, if you do want to do like plant medicine, like let's say you want to do ayahuasca, like they do a check to see like, do you have a history of bipolar or a history of schizophrenia? These are shamans asking this. Like, and if you do, you're not supposed to do the medicine, which is good. Those people should not do it because it would just push them completely off their rocker. And it annoys me because it's almost like they try to make it seem like it's actually a gift and it's like this game or this puzzle that they need to figure out, when sometimes it's just not that. Like, and trust me, when my loved one, when my family member was going through this, I really tried to kind of piece it together and kind of see, were these connections making sense? And the truth is, maybe sometimes, and for some people, they do, but these connections were random. They're making connections where they're not there. And it was like this weird phenomena where it was almost like his subconscious mind was coming forward, and it was like a dream. It's almost like what he was experiencing was like he was living a dream. And you know how when you dream sometimes, like it's all these like random things and you don't know how they're all fitting together? That's what it was like. Like, and I don't think, yeah, maybe some of it did have some type of meaning. And this is where I struggle sometimes, because there were some things that he was having certain like pretty profound like realizations about certain things. But then at the same time, there was such bad realizations that he thought he was having, where it was like I couldn't, and this is where like I can't get too personal, but like I couldn't agree with the good things without agreeing with the bad things. And the bad things that he thought were real, these delusions, were so scary, guys, like so scary. And that is where this stuff gets so dangerous and that people don't understand. Like, I can't really go into detail about what the specific delusions were, but just know like they were really dangerous, and that if he acted on them more and more, and he did, like I can't even say, but let's just say like he did put his life in danger, and he could have put other people's life in danger. And that's where this is not something that you can just be like, oh, well, it's actually a gift that he just hasn't developed. And this is where like I can try to understand that, right? But like, where are the resources to figure out this thing? Like, give me the resources. Like, someone give me the person that's going to be able to train these abilities for him. Like, it's not readily available. And it really annoyed me whenever I saw like that clip of the Undone show, because there was someone in the comments that was like, yeah, my friend didn't take her son to a mental facility. Instead, she took him to a healer, or took him to psychic school or something. Which, first of all, is that even real? Also, they must have not been that bad, is the thing. Because someone that is really bad, they are not going to listen to you when you want to take them anywhere. And that's where, like, as I said at the beginning, like, it is very hard to get someone off the street if they don't want to get off the street. And it makes it really hard for me to believe that someone would be able to get someone that's in a psychotic break and be like, hey, you need to go to this like psychic school. Like, no, like they're not gonna listen to you. Maybe for some people they do, but promise they're not as bad as it gets then, if they are. I even had told my family member in the moment, because he knows about this stuff, he knows about spiritual stuff, and I even told him in the moment, like, I think that your crown is like way open right now, because I didn't want to go against everything. Like, I wanted him to understand that I know that his reality is real to him, right? But I said, but I think your root is very closed. That's why you feel so unsafe. That's why you feel so paranoid. And he got mad at me for that. He hated that I said that to him. So, and that is the thing with this stuff, is that even if someone's crown is wide open and that's why they're experiencing all this, most of the time, and that's why it gets so dangerous, that's why people feel paranoid and unsafe, is because that means that their root is not functioning correctly, their root chakra. They don't trust life. And I do think, like, on a spiritual level, I do think like a psychotic break is almost where they can't cope with life. They can't cope with human life, and so it happens. I know that my family member is different because they did have a stroke that led to all this. But just as a general, like, spiritual cause. And this is also why it's hard for me to get behind the whole, like, schizophrenia is actually a gift, because I've seen the exact opposite. Like, whenever all this happened, I went down a rabbit hole, like, watching and researching, like, all the things that I could so that I could help. And I saw a bunch of like college professors like doing speeches or doing lectures on mental illness in other cultures, and how in other cultures you can pick out mental illness. Like, there are things called the village freak, and it's because they don't do the social norms that they're supposed to, and they do things that are like way out of character. And yeah, the certain things might be different per culture, but there's always a way to pick out the mental illness. That's what the college professor said whenever I looked it up, and that made sense to me. But then in this show Undone, in the spiritual community, they want to act like, oh, well, in other cultures, schizophrenic people are actually the shamans and the medicine people, when I've seen evidence to show the exact opposite. So I don't know, guys, I'm getting heated. People just don't understand all the complexities of this, and I wish that there was more room for nuance. Like in the show Undone, they act like these hallucinations are like actually real things. Like, it's actually visions to the past and visions to the future, when that's just not true for some people. I wish so badly I could like tell y'all the delusions. And let me just say, these delusions were completely false. And they had been triggered by an experience that he had that was a part of like this stressful situation, and his mind just took it and ran with it. And trust me, again, I'm very intuitive. I literally have people come to me and to do readings for them, and I would tell you if I felt like there was more to it. I don't. Like, for some people, it really is just random. And the thing is, like, the person that's going through it, I do believe that, like, their reality is real to them. And, like, we have to try to understand that and, like, put ourselves in their shoes, that, like, what is they are experiencing is very real to them. So we have to kind of, like, empathize. And the only thing that was able to get my loved one out of it was medication. If someone, please, someone who sees this, send me something else that could help them other than medication. I'm willing to look at it and research it. And there's a lot of research that I haven't done, because honestly, I'm almost raw to all of it, and I don't even want to risk the idea of him ever being off medicine, because it like terrifies me. I don't ever want to lose him. I don't ever want to get to that point ever again. I mean, this was like the worst thing that I've probably ever experienced. So whenever I see people just like making light of it, it really hurts. It's so different person to person. They're all having their own experience, and what sucks is that when someone, like, there's no communicating to them when they're in that space. They're not going to properly communicate. They are stuck in their own ideas, and they're very stuck on what they think is real, which makes sense because we're stuck in what we think is real too. It's a big like mind fuck. But the thing is, you can't even help them because you can't communicate. There's not a good line of communication. It's almost like dementia, guys. It's like they have dementia for a second, and they just lose who they are and what is real. Like, literally what is real. And I know, like, I promise, like, from a spiritual perspective, like, I know, like, what even is real, right? Like, nothing is real, right? And that's where, like, I don't know. The whole thing is hard. It's hard putting it in these boxes, and I don't think there is a direct answer. But what I know is that if something is unsafe, if something is putting people in danger, then that has to be fixed, like, period. Okay, I'm gonna kind of wrap this up because I am getting emotional, and there's really not much else to say. I just want people to know that there's never like a black and white answer to some of these things, and if you've never experienced it yourself, then probably not trying to have an opinion on it and trying to hear from people who have actually experienced it. Maybe one day I'll figure it all out for my loved one, and I'll figure out the more like natural way of doing things. But for right now, things have leveled out, and it might even be something that he's got to figure out on his own. If these mental health issues are a gift, someone please push me in the direction of being able to contain this gift, which I think the answer is probably somewhere in the middle, because that's usually how it is. I'm sure that I'm gonna have more come up, and I will talk about it in later episodes. I really hope that this helped you guys in some way, and please put your opinions in the comments.